It was once a nation that spanned 11 time zones, encompassed over 100 distinct ethnic groups, and was home to nearly 300 million people. The Soviet Union was not only a country, it was an idea, a formidable experiment in governance, a global superpower born out of revolution. Yet by the end of 1991, that colossal machine had ground to a halt. This is the story of how the Soviet Union, with all its power and promise, unraveled before the eyes of a changing world. Following the catastrophic collapse of the Russian Empire, revolutionary fervor led to the Bolshevik takeover in 1917. Under Vladimir Lenin's leadership, an audacious experiment began to build a society where workers controlled the means of production and social classes would vanish in the pursuit of equality. In 1922, the USSR was officially established, uniting diverse lands, from Ukraine and Belarus to the distant Central Asian republics, under one banner of socialism. The early years were tumultuous. Under Lenin, the country grappled with civil war, economic dislocation, and the challenge of uniting disparate peoples under a single ideological framework. When Joseph Stalin emerged as Lenin's successor, the Soviet Union embarked on a brutal, rapid industrialization program. The era of Stalin was marked by forced collectivization, widespread repression, and purges that claimed millions of lives. Yet, in spite of these tragedies, the Soviet state transformed into an industrial giant. This period forged the backbone of Soviet might, laying the groundwork for the Union's later status as a superpower. But the rapid growth came at a high human and moral cost, a cost that would echo through the decades. After the devastation of World War II, the Soviet Union emerged as one of the world's two superpowers. The Iron Curtain fell over Eastern Europe, splitting the globe into two ideological camps. On one side was the capitalist West, led by the United States. On the other, the communist Eastern Bloc, governed by the USSR. During the Cold War, the Soviet state poured enormous resources into military buildup, nuclear weapons, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and a vast network of spies and secret police. The space race captivated the world as the USSR celebrated early successes, launching the first satellite and sending the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into space. Yet behind this impressive front, the system was straining under the weight of central planning and isolation from rapidly evolving global economies. The Soviet economy, while formidable in military and industrial might, was hampered by inefficiencies. Long lines for basic goods, outdated infrastructure, and bureaucratic corruption increasingly became the norm. Even as the state flexed its military muscle in proxy wars and political confrontations, the domestic reality was one of stagnation and discontent. In the mid-1980s, cracks in Soviet structure began to become apparent. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev came to power. He was very different from his predecessors, a new mind, eager for reform. He introduced two major policies, glasnost openness and Perestroika restructuring. Glasnost brought a wave of transparency and freedom of thought to the state. Journalists, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens could speak freely for the first time and expose the dark aspects of the state. But this openness also brought to the surface years of resentment and resentment. At the same time, Perestroika sought to reform a stagnant but stagnant economy. Gorbachev hoped to retain socialist principles while incorporating some market mechanisms. But this mixed system led to bureaucratic confusion, inflation, and even more commodity shortages. Most importantly, Gorbachev's policies were loosening the grip of Soviet control over Eastern Europe. In 1989, a wave of revolutions swept the region. The Solidarity movement in Poland, the fall of the Berlin Wall in Germany, and peaceful transitions in Czechoslovakia and Romania. While this success was celebrated in the West, To the Soviet leadership, it signaled that the era of centralized power was coming to an end. The Soviet Union was not a monolith. It was an empire composed of varied peoples, cultures, and traditions. For decades, a centralized authority had suppressed nationalist sentiments for the sake of unity. Yet as Gorbachev loosened the reins, these long-dormant identities began to reawaken. In the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, movements for independence gathered unprecedented momentum. Voices in Ukraine, the Caucasus, and Central Asia joined the chorus of national aspirations. Ethnic groups long forced to blend into a single Soviet identity suddenly demanded recognition, self-determination, and freedom from Moscow's control. Local leaders and ordinary citizens alike began to question the legitimacy of the Soviet experiment. Referendums on sovereignty were held across the republics. What had once been a meticulously controlled narrative was now being challenged by histories that celebrated local heritage over a unified Soviet identity. The cracks became fissures, and fissures soon erupted into calls for complete independence. Simultaneously, political figures in Russia, most notably Boris Yeltsin, began to assert that Russia itself should break free from the centralized Soviet state. Yeltsin's confrontations with the communist establishment symbolized a growing sentiment that the era of Soviet governance was ending, and a new era of national governance was about to begin. In August 1991, a dramatic turn of events provided a final, fatal blow to the Soviet state. Hardline members within the Communist Party and the military, disillusioned by Gorbachev's reformist policies, staged a coup in a desperate bid to restore the old order. For 3 tense days, tanks rolled into Moscow and Gorbachev was detained under house arrest in Crimea. But the coup did not go as planned. Massive popular protests erupted in the streets of Moscow and other major cities. Boris Yeltsin emerged as a defiant leader, standing atop a tank outside the Russian parliament and rallying the masses against conspirators. The resilience of the people and the rapid collapse of the coup signaled that the tide of history had irreversibly turned. Although the coup itself was crushed, the damage was irrevocable. The authority of the Communist Party crumbled, and previously simmering nationalist movements burst into overt political action. Republic after republic declared their sovereignty, and the unity that had once defined the Soviet Union was dissolving before everyone's eyes. Just days later, on December 8, 1991, the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus met in a historic secret gathering. In what became known as the Belavisa Accords, they agreed to dissolve the Soviet Union, marking the birth of the Commonwealth of Independent States. The final, symbolic moment came on December 25, 1991, when Mikhail Gorbachev resigned as president. That night, the red Soviet flag was lowered from the Kremlin, marking the end of an era. The fall of the Soviet Union reshaped global geopolitics, giving rise to 15 independent nations. Russia faced economic and social turmoil during its transition, while other former republics experienced varied outcomes, from successful reforms of the Baltics to conflicts and instability elsewhere. The U.S. emerged as the sole superpower, and the ideological battle between communism and capitalism faded. Yet, the collapse left lasting impacts on global politics, alliances, and regional tensions. Reflecting on the Soviet Union's legacy reveals a divided sentiment. Some celebrate the triumph of democracy, others mourn the loss of a unifying vision. The collapse serves as a powerful lesson on the impermanence of power, the need for adaptability, and the enduring human drive for freedom and self-determination. It marks not just the end of an empire, but the beginning of a new global chapter shaped by change and resilience.